What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Valero Texas Open. Gonna get to all the details you need for this week about TPC San Antonio and how to expect the golf course to play. It'll help you choose some of your top DFS plays over there from the outright betting angle as well. We'll talk about the kind of key stats and comp courses you want to use to identify your top plays. We'll even go quickly hole by hole to show you some of the shots required around this venue so you're completely familiar with everything you need for this week. And we're not gonna chit chat very long. I'm not gonna waste any of your time at all. Just gonna get to all the straight facts that you need for this event. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in. TPC San Antonio is a relatively long par 72 at just over 7,400 yards. And because it's positional, it does have some rough out there, unlike what you had the Houston Open. You're going to have to be precise off the tee. You can't bomb and gouge it like you had out there for that sort of event. There's going to be a much bigger penalty for wide misses off the tee. Whether it's into the natural areas, there are plenty of opportunities for lost balls around this sort of venue, even some water that comes into play as well. So outside of that, you do have the same kind of agronomy though out there from week to week. Just like the Florida swing, you've got that Poa trivialis over there on the greens and that ryegrass overseed out there on the rest of the course. And I already talked about the rough being a little bit longer. It's listed at 2.25 inches as opposed to just a 1.25 last week. So I'd say that's really the main difference when it comes to the setup, because yardage really not all that far off. And same thing out there from the par perspective. Greens a little bit smaller than what you had over there as well. And because the rough is a lot thicker around the greens, you're going to see a lot more bogeys made around this golf course. The greens might not be as tricky as what you had for the Houston Open, but they've still got some spice to them. They've got some slopes that make them hard to putt. Also pretty difficult to get up and down on around the green. And it also looks like we're going to have some winds out there on Friday that could make conditions a little bit more difficult this year. Not really that many changes out there over the last few years either, so we kind of know what to expect around this golf course. So we take a look at the averages over the last 3 years. They're going to give us a really good sense of what to expect around here, where you can see the fairway rate is significantly lower than what we're used to seeing. In fact, about 8% lower than the PGA Tour average. Your green rate is also lower than what we're used to seeing, a little bit over 6% lower than that PGA Tour average. Scrambling rate isn't terrible, especially when the greens are running a little bit slower as they have for the last few years. Same thing with the 3-putt rate. It isn't terrible. It is a little bit higher than what we're used to seeing out here on tour, but it's not in that 10 to 12% range like we see sometimes. Birdies per round a little bit lower than your PGA Tour average, and your bogey rate a little bit higher than your PGA Tour average. I will say though that over the last year or so, especially back there in 2024, this golf course started to play pretty tough. It played over par over there for the 4 rounds. The only round it played under par was out there on Sunday, where it played to a minus 1.2 scoring average. The other 3 rounds, it played between half a stroke and a whole stroke over par, which can happen when this course starts to get a little bit firm and fast. But with all the rain that Texas has gotten over the last week or so, not quite as much over there in the San Antonio area, but they still did get some rain in that part of the state. It could be softer than what we had back there in 2024, but we'll want to wait for some of the course reports and people on site to give us the confirmation from that perspective. But if it is a little bit firmer and faster, your fairway rate was sub 50% last year. Your green regulation rate was also quite a bit lower last year as well. So those would be some of the changes you might expect if we get that kind of report from the course, as well as perhaps slightly less birdies or better per round and slightly more bogeys or worse per round. Last year, in fact, the bogey or worse average was over 3.2 per round, and your birdie average was a little bit lower than that at also about 3.2 per round. Last year's champion was an Akshay Bhatia, who is coming in off a top 3 finish at the Players. Did withdraw from last week at the Valspar, or a week before that, I should say, but is now making his start over here at Valero, Texas. You had Denny McCarthy, who just ended up, nearly shorting out there on the victory, but then it was a massive gap. I think it was like 9 shots or something just ridiculous or something like that out there from first and second down there to Rory and Henley down there at 3rd and 4th. So, the top heavy leaderboard, you did have some studs playing in it last year. But what you'll notice over here is that it's not a whole bunch of bombers. I mean, Rory, the obvious exception out there to that rule, but when you have somebody like Brendan Todd finishing in the top 5, a Russell Henley, a Denny McCarthy, it kind of gives you a sense of the type of skill set that you need around here, right? It's not so much about that power off the tee. It's that second shot. It's getting up and down around this tricky sort of a there. And if we go to the year before that, that's when Corey Connors won. Obviously, not a bomber off the tee, more of a positional player in that category. You did have your Sam Stevens of the world who hits the ball a long way. Same thing, with a Benny Ann up there towards the top, but also guys like Matt Kuchar who finished in third. We already know that he doesn't hit the ball a long way. And Chez Reavie, the quintessential positional player off the tee. And the year before that was when JJ Spawn won. Matt Jones before he went to live. Matt Kuchar again up there in that top three. Hadwin, Charles Howell III, Troy Merritt, a lot of players that are known for the second shot as opposed to that power off the tee. And you can see over here when we take a look at some of the analytics that is echoed throughout the stats. Now, they don't have it as a terrible golf course for bombers. It is a 6.6 out of 10, which is a little bit better than most out there on the PGA Tour, but it's better to go out there and be able to be accurate off the tee, as you'll see with some of those past champions. The approach distribution has a lot from 125 to 175. Also, this 50 to 125 range is now being utilized like we'd usually see out there on tour, but the other outliers that maybe 175 to 225 is utilized a hair less than what we're used to seeing. In this 225 plus range, this is almost always the par fours, maybe one of the par threes if it's truly tipped out in a back pin location, where you're going to get 4 plus 225 plus yard shots around, which is definitely higher than what we're used to seeing, which creates a little bit of a dead zone from this 175 to 225 range and a little bit of extra emphasis on some of these other categories. Around the green, not that much that really stands out there, other than that you're going to have a lot more shots out of the rough this week is what you had at Memorial Park. Memorial Park, of course, had a lot more shaved down fairway areas around the green, and then your putting around here can be pretty tough. You saw slightly more 3-putts around this golf course than what you have out there on tour, but outside of the overseeded putting stats that we're going to look at later, not a whole lot to look at in that category. And now to quickly show you the shots around this course. So we're going to go shot by shot real quickly here. 460 to open this thing up, and you can see around the green there's a lot more diversity. You've got the shaved off areas over here and a big slope to the front right side of this green, but also some bunkers and some traditional rough to hit out as well. Hole 2 is 605 yards. This is one where you're only reaching into if it's downwind and you're an average distance player, or maybe one of the bombers can reach into even if it's a neutral wind direction, but a double green, which is shared with one of the par 3s a little bit later on in the course. Hole 3 is 216 yards, so this is a long iron over the water. If it's playing into the wind, oftentimes they'll shorten it up a little bit, make it play closer to 180 yards. But with this thin green here, you can see some of the difficulty around this track, and controlling your distance is going to be paramount out there with your irons. Hole 4 is 487 yards. This is a longer par 4. You do get some run out over here in San Antonio, so you're going to see drives closer to 310, 320 for the entire week. Hole 5 is 397, one of the more scoreable par 4s around here, and this is where the wedge play comes in. You're going to have it on some of the par 5s when you go out there and you have to lay up, and then you're going to get a handful of these shorter par 4s where you're going to have to go out there and make birdies because those harder par 3s, some of those longer par 4s like you had for the whole previous, are going to do some damage over the round. And 6, another one of those scoreable looks. You can see that driving accuracy coming into play here, as this is an extremely narrow landing area, and the miss left could be a lost ball. Over here to the right, you don't want to miss in that bunker either. Hole 7's 207 yards, another example of that tough par 3. This is the other side of that double green that we were looking at before. Hole 8 is 613 yards. This is a par 5, just like the first par 5, only really reachable in 2 if you're a bomber or maybe have a very favorable wind direction. Hole 9, another longer par 4, this one close to 480 yards. And you can see there are holes here where you just have to hold on, right? The par 3s and these longer par 4s. And you're going to have some scoreable looks too, though. So I really like the mix of this golf course. You've got, some holes where you got to focus up and some holes where you can do some damage. 10's 456 here. This is a medium length par 4. I would say it's an easier start compared to starting on hole 1. That green at 1 can be especially dicey. Second hole here would be 418 yards. A very tough tee shot. In fact, they've got people hitting driver down here, but a majority of the field is probably going to take a driving iron or a 3-wood to this corner on the right side. It's just a little bit more predictable than having to carry it over this bunker and also keeping it from running out into those other bunkers. Hole 12 is 417 yards. This is one of those pitch and putt par 4s that you've got to set up a birdie look on, something in that 10 to 15 foot range at the very least. 13 is 246 yards. This is one of the par 3s that could require an iron shot over 225 yards. Same thing with a few of the other par 3s if they move it back to the back right corner. Hole 14 is 575, so this is a little bit more reachable. Let's go back and show you guys that one actually. It's a tough tee shot, tough angle. You got to hit a fade there off the tee, but even some of your medium to shorter players in the field can reach this if they hit a good tee shot. 15 is 469, so a medium to maybe slightly longer par 4, I'd say, at almost 470 yards. The thing here is that the green is one of the more hard, more difficult that you have around this golf course. 16 is 193. This is the donut green, one of the more iconic holes that you have around TPC San Antonio. Back left pin, back right pin are absolutely impossible. Anything towards the front side, though, is very scoreable. 17 is 355. This is potentially drivable, and in fact, for at least 1 or 2 rounds, they're going to move up the tee box, probably over to here to make it play about 300 yards. And then finally, hole 18 is a good finishing par 5, but a hard one because you've got water in play for your second shot. A tee shot is also pretty narrow, especially if you're banging a driver. But the second shot here is that perfect risk-reward par 5. If you're dealing with a 2-shot lead, you're for sure laying up. But if you've got to go out there and make an eagle to make up a 2-shot lead, you're going to have that opportunity as well because oftentimes it plays a little bit shorter than the scorecard yardage here, and especially on Saturday, Sunday, where they want that sort of variance, they'll give players a bone and let them go forward in 2. So a great setup out here around TPC San Antonio. But now let's take a look at some of the stats and modeling for this week and find out what to look for in players. We've got the bet the number model up over here on this site, and let's go through some of the key stats that they're looking for in players. And the first category is regular shots gained off the tee, which is almost always going to be in their modeling. But I like that they're also adding some distance from the edge of fairway to try and find some of the more accurate players, because as you saw on some of the even easier holes out there, it's a really tough tee shot, but if you can get the ball in play, you're going to have 100 or less yards in. So off the tee matters. I think distance can be an asset around this golf course, but if there's anything that I'm caring about just a little bit more than most, it would be keeping the ball in play, whether it's setting up looks from the fairway or of course avoiding some of those natural areas that you have around this track. So some of the more accurate drivers would be a Takumi Kanaya, Ben Cole's up there towards the top, also your Paul Petersons, your Brian Harman, 2 lefties there up there in the top 5, are all players that maybe get a slight boost out there in the modeling. But you don't have to be a super accurate guy, right? If you're somebody like a Rico Hoey, a pot guider that's more of that bomb and gouge sort of player, you could choose to lay up a little bit more this week, which of course is going to lead to you hitting more fairways. Regular approach play is always of the utmost importance, so you can want to look at the last 24 rounds, last 36, last 48, whatever the case may be. That is always going to be something that I'm advocating for in your process. Some of the best iron players over that sample size would be a Henrik Norlander, Tom Kim, Tommy Fleetwood up there towards the top end of the board, Gerard, Suber, Lee Hodges, Joel Damon also grading out very well. But in general, good iron play is always something that I'm looking for. So maybe not a surprise right there, but over here in this approach category, the 75 to 125 range is something that Bet the Number is emphasizing a little bit more. So that would of course be where a lot of those scoreable par 4s are going to come in play, or even if you're a medium to shorter player in the field, a lot of those par 5s are going to come with that wedge. So guys like Matteo Manicero have been painting the flag 6 out there in that 50-yard bucket. Kevin Velo, Bud Cauley, who I'm sure we'll have to talk about at some point, is the #1 ranked play out there in the Bet the Number model this week. I also believe he was #1 in my model that I ran as well, so I think he's going to be quite a decent option out there for this kind of event. But McNeely also really good in that proximity bucket. A Tom Kim, Kurt Kitayama kind of standing out there. Joel Damon, we know that iron play in general has been hot, but also in that range. And then even guys like a Doug Gim down there and Lee Hodges standing out in that bucket. Around the green, I think it's going to come into play, especially on Friday. They're expecting 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts as of right now. It's obviously early in the week, but if they get that, it could be a really dicey round out there for Friday. So some of the players here are going to be worth consideration, but on top of just around the green, which you can see some of the poppers in that category, it's not going to be of the utmost importance or anything, because keeping yourself in play, hitting greens and fairways is really the product, the recipe to go out there and have success around this golf course. But even the best players, the green and regulation average was sub 11 last year. You had a sub 7 fairway rate last year as well. So even your best players, right, were hitting like 9, maybe 10 fairways per round. Your best players were maybe hitting 13, 14 greens per round. Around the green and bogey avoidance is going to come into play. So not just this around the green, but over here with bogey avoidance, another key stat that I want to look at. And you've got Lee Hodges, who seemingly seemingly has shown up in every category. Denny McCarthy, this is really his calling card out there on the PGA Tour. Maybe not the highest birdie percentage player, but really good at keeping big numbers off the card. We know if he, of course, was in contention to go out there and win this last year. You got Daniel Berger, Mac Meissner towards the top end of the board, Bud Cauley again. Promised you would talk about him here in a second. Guys like Matt Kuchar, Andrew Putnam, who's top 10 in the modeling, also Kurt Kitayama, that are all getting a significant boost because of their around the green play and their bogey avoidance in general. Then the last key stat that we have on here would be the overseeded putting, which of course is the surface that we have for this week. And because we've had now 2 months out here on this Poa Trivalis overseed, we have a really good idea for the best form players. The guys that have putted the best on this type of grass in 2025 are definitely, and not even just a little bit, definitely worth boosting out there for this event. So Denny McCarthy is already one of the best putters on tour. He has been fantastic out there in this type of agronomy. Sam Ryder, Brant Snedeker, Jacob Bridgman. I mean, we saw him over there at the Valspar making just about everything. Same type of grass, so not a surprise. He's one of the top 5, top 10 players in that category. But Jake Knapp, he loves these kind of greens. Guys like Matt Kuchar, maybe that's why he's had so much success at this golf course. It's Jake Knapp. And then, of course, because Bud Cauley shows up in every single category, right? Guys that are putting well on the overseed. So, anyone that's over like 0.2, 0.3 shots gained per round on the overseed, going to be getting a significant bump over there in my modeling, because unlike some of the Players Championship courses, API, that sort of thing, where it's an absolute ball strikers affair, that's not really the case here. In fact, if we sort out here by model score over here on the BTN model, you've got, sure, Tommy Fleetwood towards the top. He's a stud, he's a ball striker, but Bud Cauley actually slightly edges him out when it comes to this model ranking. You've got Henrik Norlander up here. You've got Denny McCarthy, who, sure, his ball striking's gotten a lot better over the last few years, but he's more of a short game guy than anything. A Matt Kuchar's top 10 in the model, right? That should tell us a lot about the sort of player that we're looking for this week. It's not the Scotty Schefflers, the Rorys that bomb it a whole long way. It's more of these guys that keep the ball in play, that tear apart these more positional golf courses, and that's what I'll personally be looking for in my modeling. And now a few comps that should play pretty similar to what we're going to get this week. First off, we've got the Shriners Children's Open and TPC Summerlin, which is another one of those circuits that you have for the TPC network, and a track that's not that long, more about that driving accuracy off the tee. And a lot of the players that we see towards the top end of these leaderboards were ones that we saw showing up in our modeling. So for example, a Doug Gim was grading out pretty well. Same thing with guys like a JT Poston, but you still have some bombers showing up at this course. So I would say bombers can still get it done around a Shriners Children's Open, just like they can around this event, right? Maybe not the preferred kind of skill set, but you're still going to see a few showing up there in that top 10, top 20. Year before that was when Tom Kim won. You had guys like Adam Hadwin, Eric Cole, Alex Noren rounding out that top 3. Of course, guys that are far from bombers off the tee. Your Joel Damon that we saw showing up a few times in the modeling as well, out there in that top 7. But also, to go back, Isaiah Salinda, right? He finished top 10 that year. He's a bomber off the tee. Your Pendrith, right? He finished top 5 out there in 2023. It's not a course where you have to be one thing or the other. Year before that, Tom Kim won again. Obviously, a very good course fit for what we're going to get this week. But guys like a Tom Hoagie, S.H. Kim, more accurate players off the tee, mixing in with your Cantlays or even your Mito Pereiras of the world that are a little bit longer off the tee. So if you want to look at this event for a little bit of that leaderboard crossover, I think it's a really good one, both from the setup standpoint, but also strength of field. It's going to be spot in line with what we get for Valero. You've also got the Bermuda Championship, which we don't have the shots gained metrics from, which is the one big negative here, but from the field strength standpoint is also very similar to what we're going to get this week. Last event we go through isn't really the case over the last few years, so I guess that's why it's worth pointing out. But this is another short positional golf course where it's about the wedge play more than anything, and you're going to see a lot of those players showing up towards the top. So you can see your Mark Hubbards, your Justin Lowers, who, Sam Ryder really set up well for this sort of track. Year before that is when Camilo Villegas won. You look at that. Alex Noren showing up again. It's a shame that we haven't seen him playing more over here in 2025. And the year before that is when we had Seamus Power win. So all these different leaderboards, I think, worthy of looking for a little bit of crossover. And you can see here, right, you still got your Kevin Hughes showing up, right? He's long off the tee, right? I wouldn't call Ben Griffin short off the tee by any means. This is more of a golf course where it's what you're doing from fairway in, right? If you're a bomber and you're still solid with your form from your approach play, your around the green, and your putting, you're still in play around this sort of track. And then the last one we have here is the one that field strength-wise could be a little bit troublesome, I'd say, but you can still look for crossover on some of your mid to top tier players, and that would be the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So Pebble Beach Golf Links, another one of these tracks that emphasizes a lot of the same sort of key stats. The unfortunate aspect is that it's been a signature event for the last few years, so a lot of your top level players are showing up here, which aren't all showing up at this event. So, your Sepp Straka's, Tom Kim's played very well at this sort of track, right? Your guys that aren't, your Rory McIlroys of the world that were showing up here were more accurate players, that were good iron players, like a Shane Lowry, Lucas Glover fit that to a T. A Justin Rose fits that to a T. Same thing with guys like a Henley, a Kim, a Straka, even a Horschel down there in that top 10. So even though this was a signature event, year before that, you had your Wyndham win it, right? He's a long bomber off the tee. Same thing with Ludwig going out there and finishing in second, but you still had your Hubbards finishing in the top 5 that year. Your Pavons of the world that aren't bombers off the tee. This golf course emphasizes a lot of the same key stats. It's just that you're going to have to parse through some of this signature event data to get to some of the more applicable stuff. So if you go back to 2023, 2022, you're going to get this event as a regular PGA Tour event. That, of course, was when Justin Rose won. You had Brendan Todd down there in second, right? Another example of one of those shorter players that gets it done. Brandon Wu, Peter Malnati, the same thing, right? These are the kind of guys that you'd expect to see showing up this week. So, if you're going to look for some of that crossover, maybe the last 2 years isn't the best, but the years before that are great out there for Pebble Beach. So 3 golf courses that should play pretty similar to this week that you can use for a little bit of that crossover. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That of course will include our live stream over there on Wednesday. It'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time, going through all your questions down there in chat. We're going to go through a weather report, also some DFS ownership out there before lock, contest selection, a little bit of lineup construction out there as well as all the underdog and prize picks props out there for round number 1. So for all the extra information, make sure you stay tuned for all of that later on this week. Should be a link down to the description at some point to give you a way to go out there and remind yourself out there for that live stream, but also go ahead and comment down below what you've got as the winning score for this event for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. And if you can get that exact winning score, it'll be on a first come first serve basis, by the way. So the first person to guess that number and get it correct is going to win a free month access to my Patreon, which is where I'm posting all my projections, all my modeling for any given week. On there, I've got all my custom model rankings on there, all my projections for DFS. You got form on there, course history, also shots gained metrics that go out there and reference for every single player. And of course, from the modeling side of things, I also post all my custom model weightings over there as well. So it gives you a way to go out there and replicate what I do out there in my process to try and find, and you can obviously adjust it out there to your liking, the players that make the most sense for any given event. So for a chance to earn that for free, like I said, just give me the winning score out there for this event. Make sure that it hasn't been taken before you go out there and give your guess. And the best of luck with all of your exposure that you're getting to. Well, whether it's the giveaway, I hope you guys go out there and you're able to earn that free month, see what the Patreon page is all about, or whether it's with your outright bets, GPP lineups, all of that sort of stuff. I hope to see your names up there towards the top, and let's have ourselves a week.